Hey, I'm Matt Henley.
And I'm Rain Woods, and welcome to the Showtime podcast for the Pride of the Mountains Marching Band.
Whether you are a current member of the Pride of the Mountains, one of our incredible alumni of the Long Purple Line, or a supporter of the band, we are so happy you tuned in today. I'm Matt Henley, the director of the Pride of the Mountains Marching Band here at Western Carolina University, and with me is our chief student archivist, Rain Woods.
Hey, Matt. I got a question for you.
All right, let's go.
Do you get post-show season depression? And if so, what does it look like for you?
That's a really, really good question. Postseason for me, there's a little bit of sadness for sure because, I just kind of start missing everybody. You get used to being around that group of people and doing this really fun thing together. But, there's also a time when it's time to put that thing to bed, if you know what I mean. And we had a wonderful season. I have no regrets. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, I curl up in my bed with a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and I watch random historical documentaries on YouTube, and I don't leave the bed the whole day. See, but in past seasons, my strategy was to get it out in the first 24 hours after the banquet, and then I'm good till August.
Right.
But enough of my emotional spiral. Let's pivot into something more uplifting, because today's guest, he's one of the biggest reasons that the Pride looks, sounds, and feels the way it does today. Someone who genuinely needs no introduction, but, for the 4 people listening who may not know who Bob Buckner is, he's called Mr. History for a reason. This is true.
Well, I'm very, very lucky to call this guy a friend and a mentor, and I've just been a fan of his whole life, that's for sure. But I tell you, Bob, I cannot thank you enough for being with us today. So thank you for being with us.
Glad to do it.
Yeah. I think when I started thinking about this episode, yes, obviously very interested in the time we spent together leading the band, if you will. But I think I was so lucky when we used to randomly ride in cars to high schools to visit. You shared a lot of history with me. And so I'd kind of like to start back when you were a student at Western Carolina College, I believe, back then at WCC when you started, and came from Waynesville Township High School in Haywood County. And just kind of how you ended up at Western Carolina, what your time looked like here, who your first directors were. Just talk about your band experience when you were a student here.
Interesting. And boy, that goes back a few years since I just turned 80 this past May. It's more than a few years. But my first band director here was Aaron Hyatt, who had been my band director at Waynesville Township High School for 2 years. You may not know this, but he graduated from Waynesville Township High School.
Oh, wow.
Under the direction of Charlie Isley, who was the legendary band director who built that program. And Aaron decided that he would take the job at Western Carolina. So he came here, and one of the first things he did was he wanted to start building the numbers in the band. So the way he got me to come here was I had been coming to summer music camps, which during that time is quite a bit different than the symposium. It was literally a concert band camp, lasted for 2 weeks. Imagine that, what that would cost today. Yeah. But we had faculty members, many of whom were from the Chicago Symphony. Wilbur Simpson, the timpanist, came in. Louis Stout came in. He was one of the horn players in the symphony, and a number of people like that. I mean, just incredible people to be around. And the good thing was you found out that not only were they superb musicians, they were really good people, very cool to be around. One of my earliest memories was seeing Dick Trevarthen play third base for the softball team, the faculty softball team that we beat for the very first time. It took us like 3 years to beat them, but
guy wrote our fight song. Let's go.
Yeah, we needed that. But it was so much fun to get to know who they were and to find out a little bit about them. And I was so comfortable from having done that camp that it was pretty natural progression. My father had finished the 10th grade, and he ended up having a very successful career as a maintenance supervisor and foreman at Dayco Corporation. When he started, it was Dayton Rubber Company. But basically, he always emphasized to me, "You're going to college." And I remember coming home one day, and I was so excited. I said, "Dad, I just found out there's only 12 grades." He said, "Oh, no, for you, there's 16. So I knew right away I was going to college. And he always told me, he said, "I don't care what you major in, just do something you're happy at." And by that time, I had discovered music and band, and through that band camp, and became very intrigued by it. So when I came to Western, the main reason I came was Aaron Hyatt, because I was comfortable with him. I already had a few friends who were here from summer camps, that kind of stuff. And he offered me a scholarship, $150 for the year.
Hey.
Now, at that
Dang.
time, we probably, I don't know what we paid to go to college that year. Room, board, everything was probably $3,500, maybe not even that much. I don't know. But I do know that when I got here, I was the uniform manager, I was the librarian, and I was the equipment manager. And I assumed that I got paid $50 a piece to do all of those.
Per job.
And we were on the quarter system, so it was 3 quarters. So you did our first quarter ended after Thanksgiving, and I think maybe we came back after Thanksgiving for a week, and then we had finals, and then we came back for a winter semester. We actually started, I believe, before Christmas, went to sometime in January, early February, and then came back for the spring. So it was a very unusual schedule for me, being, of course, I thought it was pretty cool after having been in high school where you do semesters. But at any rate, he was the person that got me here. Aaron later decided that he wanted to work on his doctorate at Ohio State, and he was very fascinated by research. So when he came back from achieving his doctorate, he decided that he would go into administration. So he never came back as band director. So the band director that replaced him at that time was a guy named Bill Curtin. And Bill Curtin was an anomaly. He was a very interesting guy. And one of the cool things that happened to me was that I played dance jobs with all these guys because Jim Crocker, my high school band director, had insisted that I learn to play string bass. 4 days after I started playing, I played my first dance job with him. And so he just said, learn these scales and show up Saturday. By the way, I've already checked with your parents. It's okay. So it's one of those fun moments. And so when I got through, when I got to college, I played with Aaron, and I think I might have played a gig or two with Trevarthen. He was a wonderful piano player and jazz piano player and arranger. And Aaron was a very fine alto saxophonist. I can't remember who else we played with. I think maybe Norman West played some gigs with us on drums. But at any rate, when Curtin came in, he was a phenomenal set player. And he had gone to the University of Michigan. He had a very successful high school band in Niles, Michigan. So, but when he came in, he was all excited because he was onto this new marching style, Patterns of Motion.
Patterns of Motion,
And
yes.
Patterns of Motion basically was a kaleidoscopic drill. What you have to remember then, marching bands during that era rarely faced the stands. They faced in whatever direction they happened to be going. So the bands in this area primarily were doing Cassavant drill, floating diamonds and all that kind of stuff, a lot of step 2 drills. But Patterns of Motion meant that we learned in squads of 4, and they would, every 8 counts, it was a different picture. And it was a manipulation of all that. And which really became a key to me later on as I became a drill writer, because I kind of modeled my charting after that. But Bill Curtin was a piece of work. He's a great big man, probably weighed 310, 320 pounds, incredibly talented. He was the first drummer that I ever heard play a single hand roll. He would do a finger roll, I guess is what you'd call it. And he would start a roll and lift his right hand, and it still sounded the same. I thought, oh my gosh, how do you do that? But he had also been with the Michigan band when they did their tour in Russia. He was good friends with Harold Jones, who was the percussion guy at East Carolina for years and years. So this guy was well connected, and when he left Cullowhee, he went on to Kent State. He was there a couple of years, and then he joined Ice Capades. It was the Disney on Ice, I think was the name of it. And so he played for years professionally. Then last time I saw him, he had actually gone back into teaching. He was teaching at a junior high school of all things.
Oh, wow.
but he was the first guy that introduced me to patterns of motion and to really introduced me to a different style of marching band than what I'd been accustomed to. And it was interesting for me because that was also the same year that I started teaching at Silva.
Right.
That was my senior year.
Yeah, I think it's one of the craziest things you've ever told me was I didn't even process this, but when you were you did your student teaching over there, I believe. Is that right?
No.
Where'd you do your
Well, I
student teaching?
kind of did, but
Kind of did. But basically, you were your senior year of college, you were hired as the band director at Silva Webster High School. Is that correct? You
That's
did
correct,
both at the same
yes.
time.
I got
That's wild.
I got a phone call. I was working at Daco. My dad get me summer work, and it was hard work. If you worked in that mill, there were some really hard jobs in there,
bet.
and it was always hot and nasty and everything. And it was beginning of August, and Aaron Hyatt called me and he said, "I think I've got a job for you." And I thought dance job immediately, and he
right.
said, "No," he said, I want to see if you're willing to do this, but I want you to call Mr. Carr Hooper, who was the principal at Silva Webster High School, and he wants to interview you." And I'm like, "What does he want to interview me for?" And it was like, he wants to hire a band director. And I said, "Mr. Hyatt, I haven't graduated yet." Now, he was not my band director then. He came back, he was an administrator, but I had the greatest respect for him. So I set up an interview, and I go down and meet Carr Hooper, who, by the way, had spent the Second World War in a Japanese prison camp. He and his wife in the Philippines. They were working in the Philippines and were captured immediately and spent the whole war there. So he suffered no fools, I will tell you that. I've never been in a school that had that kind of discipline. I've never been anywhere that had that kind of discipline. But he was, for me, was one of the keys in my development. So at any rate, he interviewed me and he said, "All right, when can you start?" And so I remember showing up, and we had no practice field. If you know where the baseball field is at Smoky Mountain now,
Right,
that's
yeah.
where we ended up practicing after we mowed it and picked up the rocks. Every day before band, we would line the band up and just walk down the field and pick up rocks. We must have moved a ton of gravel off that field. But my first rehearsal was in a gravel parking lot. I just lined it. And I had 12 kids show up the first night, and at the end of the rehearsal, 3 of them came up and said, "This is a lot like work. We don't think we want to do this." I said, "Well, you're right. It is going to be a lot of work." I didn't care. I went from, well, I'm going to have the best 12-piece band in the world, and I'll have the best 9-piece band in the world. So and I don't even remember what the instrumentation was, but by the end of that season, I had called every kid that had ever been in band or even thought they would like to be in band. By the end of the year, we had 48 kids in the
wow.
fall.
Heck yeah.
Holy
So that was pretty good.
Quintupled.
Probably the best recruiting job I ever did.
And I guess that was kind of wild for you too. I mean, from a learning standpoint, you're there just in the job doing the thing, but then you would have to go to class at some point, right, to finish
yeah.
it. So I guess you're probably walking in and saying, "I don't know how to do this. I've discovered. Can you help me do this?"
It was actually the best thing that ever happened to me because the first thing that would happen, like during that band camp, I would go home and I would call Jim Crocker and I'd say, "Are you through yet?" "Yeah, I need to talk." So I'd drive to the old band room in Waynesville. And we'd sit on the front steps while he smoked a pack of cigarettes, and he would have a conversation with me about organizational things and just about kids. I don't know that I ever met anybody that motivated kids any better than Jim Crocker did. And you didn't even know you were being motivated. I mean, it was just so cool. Right. He was cool. I guess that would be the word that you would use.
Cool. And talking about that Tuscola connection again, a.k.a. Waynesville Township High School, Jim Crocker, who was the band director there, Aaron Hyatt, who was the band director there, and now Jimmy Crocker, Jim Crocker's son, who's been a tried and true friend of the program for 20, 25 years now.
Yep.
It's just amazing that connection. I graduated from Tuscola High School. John Henson graduated from Tuscola High School. It's a wild
and then don't forget Tim Wise, who was
Tim
with
Wise
you
got his
last
master's
year.
degree here.
Wise.
Then comes back and does a year with us. Dylan Engel.
Yeah, that's another one. He'd been the
taught
band
at
director
Tuscola
there.
High School. So I don't know. It's a wild
Crazy.
connection when you look at all that stuff.
Yeah, and I hope that can continue to be strong. But the other thing that would happen to me is when I actually started teaching, I taught in 6 elementary schools and the high school. So I was teaching in seven schools and going to school at the same time. And the schools were like Log Cabin, Qualla, Little Savannah, which is on the way to Franklin, Scotts Creek School, Silva Elementary, which was replaced by Fairview, and Webster Elementary, and then at Silva Webster. So I was going in all those schools, and I operated out of my car that I did not own. My dad owned the car. So they paid me $50 a month for gas. Now imagine that. And I probably had a little left over, but I gave that to my dad because it was his car. And so at the end of the day, you know, I was learning. It was amazing how much I learned. I kept notes all the time. And as soon as I finished, if I discovered something in class that I didn't know how to do, and it was my first experience teaching woodwinds. So I go in to start teaching clarinets, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know, gosh, embouchure, what is this? What's that wooden thing you put on it? You know,
What is a
that
ligature?
So I would just come back to campus the next day, and I would corner my professors and say, "You didn't teach me how to do it." And they were like, "No, you just weren't listening." And that was probably more correct, come to think of it. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I was not afraid. That's what I do remember. I was not afraid to make a mistake. I had great support here at Western. I had great support from the people at Silva Webster High School. Couldn't have asked for a better situation. And, you know, I often think, gosh, if everybody could learn to teach like that, you know, it'd make a big difference.
Yeah, being immersed in it and being in class all at the same time, it's kind of wild. For sure. But I think, you know, we're going to come back to the Western connection a little bit. And yeah, you told me those stories, even like getting student teachers that came, there were some amazing student teachers that went out into the field of music education later on. But it is simply amazing what you did at Silva Webster High School, though. I mean, going from a band of 9, as you say, in a gravel parking lot, and, you know, however many years later, 11 years later, you're literally winning a Grand National Championship with that school and with that band program, and the fact also that, you know, most schools, let's get real, have a junior high or a middle school situation that's your feeder where you start your students, and they have their own directors and they feed the high school and all that stuff. Well, here, even to this day, you know, they're just now getting ready to possibly build a middle school. But even to this day, it's you know, elementary schools that go to 8th grade and then they go to high school. So, yeah, you were having to travel around, and a lot of those places didn't even have band rooms. You were teaching out of janitor's closets or cafeterias. But you got to tell one of my favorite stories, though, how you combated that between you, and you finally got an assistant director, I guess.
I did.
So tell that story, Bob. I love that one.
Well, another guy that was a key help for me was a guy named Mike Troll. And Mike had been, he was from Shelby, North Carolina. There were a group of people that came from Shelby. And I think a lot of that had to do with Bill Curtin having been a Michigan guy, and Homer Hayworth, who was the band director at Shelby, had been a Michigan guy. And he was a good band director, and there were a lot of people that came, the Pools, Keith Poole and Bryant Poole, and then both the Trolls, Steve Troll and Mike Troll, and later Scott Troll. So there were 3 of them that came through. Well, Mike started going, he went to work with me. And one of the things that he would do, he was as crazy as I was. You know, he would say, we'd come up with an idea, and he'd go, yeah, we can do that. So one summer in North Carolina, I have a background. I was a high school bus driver. Like, you could drive a bus as a student. So I knew that they retired those buses some every year. So I talked to our superintendent and asked him if we could have one of those buses to make a portable classroom. And so we took this bus and gutted the inside, took all the seats out of it. Mike got in there with a spray gun, spray painted the inside of it. I know he was like, we're going to paint it light yellow. And we put 220 heat in it. We carried a rack of chairs, a rack of stands, and then we had a little desk. We never did get it built the way we wanted to, but we had a little place where we could do repairs and stuff like that. Because you're always, when you're doing all those different schools, somebody's always got a problem, you know, with their reed or, you know, mouthpiece or something. So at any rate, we put that thing together, and Mike drove it around and
Taught out of it.
We taught out of it. And for a lot of those kids, they will still tell you that it was the nicest classroom they were in all day because it was always warm, and it was always a light color. It was pretty. And they loved it. They loved coming out and getting the band,
bus.
having the band bus.
Band bus.
So it was kind of a fun thing. And I'll never forget. And we had a 220 outlet. And
That's crazy.
You just back up to the school and they put the outlets on the wall and we plugged that thing in and go to work.
Power. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun thing.
Let's steer back to Western Carolina. So when you were a student here, we've obviously seen pictures and all that kind of stuff, but
Definitely not right behind us right here
yeah,
in the
but
display.
Memorial Stadium. So
Also known as
There
the
and
coolest
hide.
stadium ever.
yeah. So what was it like being in there, marching in that stadium, and what was the environment like on game day?
Actually, it was a really fun stadium to perform and rehearse in, and we got to rehearse in it like maybe once a week. The cool thing was that to come into the stadium, and I don't know if it still exists. I haven't been over there recently, but there was an opening through Stillwell Building. There was like a little
Yes.
truck tunnel. that
Yeah,
went
yeah,
through.
that's still here.
Well, and we would line up in the parking lot and march down through there. And of course, you get in that tunnel, and it was so loud, and that just made us think we were even better than we were. 'Cause I don't remember how good the band was. I remember that we had some really good players. I thought we were probably a little better concert band than marching band. But now Bill Curtin, he convinced us we were a great marching band, and I'm not so sure. I mean, I would have to go back and look at stuff from that era to really know.
Right.
But
I got you covered, Bob.
The cool thing in there was that that stadium, no sound escaped. If you think about our stadium now, the thing that works in it is there's a building on each end of it. There's a backside now and the front side. So the sound can't go anywhere. That's why that stadium is so loud. Well, if you look at the old Memorial Stadium, there were trees in one end zone and then stands on the other side, Hunter Library behind it, and Stillwell in the other end zone. So it was loud. It was very loud. And later on, Bob Welch, when he was band director here, started the first contest over there. So my band, actually, my high school band, competed in there, and they loved it because it just made
It sounded good.
Yeah, it was a bigger place. You could get the place maybe seated 3,500, something like that. But it was, we thought we were the stuff, going into that place. But yeah, fun place to rehearse and perform.
Very cool.
I love looking at pictures of that stadium. It's so cool.
Yeah, and when they were building the new science building over there, they had to obviously dig all that up out of there, and they found old remnants of it because you realize those stands, a lot of it was concrete, so they covered it in dirt back in the day. But when they had to dig a lot of that stuff out, it was very interesting to go over there and watch all that happen. But
I wonder if they found any old mouthpieces or
Or like any reeds.
guaranteed. Well, and speaking of athletics and all that kind of stuff, there's also a really cool little story about the Victory Bell. Why don't you just talk a little bit about that? I think the Victory Bell used to be up at the old Student Union, right up on the very top of the hill.
Yeah, they had. I don't know the origin of it. I don't know anything about that. But I remember two things. There was a statue of Little Caesar, and I don't know who Little Caesar was or what he represented. But I remember if you lived in Moore Dorm or anywhere on campus, every now and then the people from that other school would want to come and steal Little Caesar. Why, I have no idea. Although I do remember a story about some of our students stealing a live bear from Lenore Ryan.
They stole a live bear.
Yeah, and actually in the process, unfortunately, it lost its life. Oh, God. So they ended up finding someone who would replace the bear. But they killed it. Apparently, the bear that died was female, and they found a male bear. So there was a little mix-up on the other end of that.
Oh, my
but
God.
yeah, that's a great story. Steve White probably would be the guy you need to interview about that because I'm sure he remembers all of it. But also when we had the Victory Bell, what I remember, because I was in a band, a lot of times we didn't get to do it, but a lot of people would run up the hill if and when we won a game. Right. And a lot of our seasons, a great season for us was 7-2 or something like that. But they would run up there and ring the bell.
Right.
And then, and I think the rest of that story is when they built the
Alumni Tower.
Alumni Tower, that bell is in that tower.
It is.
From what
it's
I
hanging.
understand.
It's hanging up in there. Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot of people really see that these days, since walking under that tower kind of makes you not graduate in 4
Yeah,
years. But it's up there. Trust us.
Well, I walked under it a lot.
Oh my God, me
But
too.
But yeah, that's and hence why we still ring a bell at the stadium. And the team does after
Yeah,
a
Dr.
win.
Bardot was really big on that, and Ron Bumgarner, who was a Silva Webster student, was a trombone player in my band, and also played football at Western
here,
Carolina. He was the one that put that bell together.
Exactly. Well, obviously you're there. You are. You're at Silva Webster High School, and this is the 1970s. You're building your band program. You're obviously 3 miles from this campus, and there was some real growth of the band program here at Western during that time when Welch came in, and there were some incredible music educator group of people that came through during that time. The Sandy Boones, Chris Cole, the Caldwells, we could go on and on and on, that really fed, if I will, I'll say the music education in the Western North Carolina kind of
Absolutely.
area. So this was really a hub of music education that built music education, and why I think band in general is so well respected and people are so proud of it in our area. I'm not talking about just Cullowhee. I'm talking about all of Western North Carolina, and why music education, instrumental music education, is so important to a lot of people. So during that time, what was your impression of what was going on over here, and how that grew during that time?
One of the people that influenced me tremendously was Bob Welch. And Bob Welch, interestingly, the last time I saw him, he was here at the Tournament of Champions to watch his grandson perform in the band. And I was doing tapes, and he sat right behind me. And I actually recognized his wife, Joyce, before I did him. And so we had a great conversation. We caught up on a lot of things that day. But Bob was the first guy, for instance, that told me about Midwest. I never knew Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic. I'd see stuff in magazines, but I didn't know really what it was. And he was like, "You got to go to this." He had a kind of a gruff voice, but he would always. And some of those people, Chris Cole does an absolutely fabulous imitation of Bob Welch, but he would say, "You need to see this." And I remember going in the first night and watching the Thomas. Well, the first thing I heard was the Navy Band. And I was blown away with that. That was on a Wednesday night. On Thursday morning, Thomas Jefferson High School from Minneapolis, Minnesota, played. And they opened with a festival prelude, Alfred Reed. And I never knew that a high school band could make the same quality of sound that the Navy Band could make. That was the eye-opener for me, was like, I figured if you got the notes played, that's a
Right.
lot. But no, they had the sound. And so what you start to realize is this is all connected. And so I went for several years. The first time we went, he loaded Mike Trull and I and a couple of beers in a state vehicle, and we drove to Chicago.
I won't tell anybody.
In a snowstorm.
Oh, wow, of course.
And drove back in a snowstorm. And one of the times we came back, we got stranded in Indianapolis. They closed the interstate. The ice was so bad. So we ended up, it took us an extra day to get home. But it was, he just, he thought outside the box in terms of, if you want to be a good band director, this is what you have to do. And here are the things you need to know. And he also brought literature that I had not been exposed to. The Western Band played music from Prague, which was, I guess, is kind of a standard. If you're a really great band, that's one of the pieces you want to play. And they did that early in his tenure. That had to be in the early 70s. The piece was not very old, maybe a couple years old when he did that. So, and he had this really good music camp, and he had all these people that would come up, and he was really pushing the graduate school then, which is something that I really miss now. I really felt like that was a very positive thing for us. And they just, I guess, didn't feel like our department was large enough to support it. But it was, trust me, it was a wonderful program. So Bob was the person that really got that thing going. And when Bob left, he was replaced, I believe, by Joe Scagnoli. Joe Scagnoli became a dear friend, it still is, and when he left, he went on to Ball State University, and he retired from Ball State. I do think he came out of retirement one year, went to Morehead State maybe for a year for an interim thing, but he was also terrific. And he was raised in upstate New York, so he just brought a different perspective to things.
Right.
And he was the friendliest and most open person. If there was anything you needed to know, you could ask, and he would not hold back. And I think he and Bob both shared that. You had a couple of interim people. There was a guy named, I believe his name was Bob Shirley, who ended his career as a middle school director in Texas. And he was a really talented guy, but his personality was not really well suited for getting a lot of kids in the band. They just didn't keep people going.
You know what I think is kind of cool about all that is, is that I guess I would say, Western Carolina University and the band program here and the music educators, the band directors themselves, they continue to teach people just like you. You're out in the field, you're doing the thing, but they continue to educate you and taking you to Midwest. And I mean, you were into the profession 5, 6, 7, 8 years at that point, and you're still learning from this place and these incredible band directors that came through here. Matter of fact, Bob Welch, I believe, was the guy that applied and took the wind ensemble to the CBDNA, College
Absolutely.
Band Directors National Association regional conference that year was held in Miami, Florida, and drove this band from this valley to Miami to play in one of the most prestigious places you can play.
You know how they got there?
How'd they get there?
Private cars.
Oh, really?
Do what you got to do.
They gave them gas money, and that was it. It's like, we've been accepted, we're going. All right, here's $20. I don't know how they did it, but some of those guys, again, that were in that band could tell you that was.
Yeah, Sandy Boone has told me a couple of those stories.
Yeah.
But shout out to our current wind ensemble. They're actually going back this year for the first time since then. It's fantastic. In February, it's going to be in Tampa, Florida. I will be there for sure to celebrate that momentous occasion. So anyway, I think you're right about the thinking outside the box when it came to Welch. I really believe that.
Yeah, he was that way. Scagnoli was that way, and was a good influence on me. Then they had a couple of years when they went through a director a year. It seemed like one of the guys that was here for a year, I believe, was a guy named Joel Schultz. Joel was the soprano soloist for Spirit of Atlanta when they did Georgia. He was that guy, and I think he had gone to East Carolina, and he. After he was here, he went on to a professional playing career. He played, I think, in the Navy band. I mean, he was a player,
legit player. Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know much about his band background other than the fact that he was here, and I really don't know how that happened.
Well, we actually were talking to some former drum majors from back then, and actually his name was brought up as just bringing kind of a new energy because he was at least tuned into the drum corps stuff that was going on at that time and kind of brought the corps style, if you will, here to Western.
Interesting you say that. Backtrack a little bit to Bill Curtin. Bill Curtin had told me about Drum and Bugle Corps. I'd never heard of it. And he had studied privately with Frank Arsenault.
Oh, wow.
Who was the rudimental champion.
Yeah.
I mean, even guys that didn't know anything about percussion knew.
Guys like me to this day know that name, yeah.
About who that guy was. I mean, he's phenomenal. And when we were high school band directors, we used to have 33 and a third RPM records, and we'd listen to Frank break down the rhythm. He'd do a long roll, and I mean, it seemed like it'd take 15 minutes to get into it, but it was amazing stuff. But again, it was those people that came in here that brought us that new information, made us curious.
Well, the next chapter of your career I also find interesting because you basically ended up leaving Smoky Mountain High School after you won the national championship to start your own company, United Music Enterprises, because back then a lot of bands did not have staffs of things, right? So you created these camps, if you will, where you would hire a percussion person, a guard person, a wind part, whatever, and you would create these camps, and bands would send their kids in to these camps, and then you would also supply staff to go to their band, right?
Yes.
So, and then that's when you got big into drill writing and writing drill for programs all over the country, big into clinics, doing clinics all over the country. So talk a little bit about that period of time. That was a huge part of your life.
Well, some interesting things happened to me, and this was about fall of 1979. And when I left Silva, the first night we got back from Whitewater, where the national championship was, I didn't have a place to stay that night. I was not going to drive to Waynesville and stay with my parents. Nothing against my parents. They were great, very supportive, but I was like, I don't need that right now. I spent the night in the band room at Silva. I slept on a hat box. We used to carry all our Shakos in. So I spend the night down there, get up the next morning. Our first camp is at Tuscola High School. And it was a local camp Jim Crocker put together. And I would have a deal with the band director. You recruit people in and we'll bring the staff and pay them. So we did that. I guess we did 5 or 6 of those. Then we started doing what we call full band camps, where we would write your show, write the music, and I did a lot of that in partnership with Dick Trevarthen, who was an amazing partner. And so I did that for a year or two, and then I realized he couldn't write the music fast enough to keep up with me. So I started using other arrangers. Pete Spadero from Pittsburgh wrote for Norwind Band. People like, a number of people like that came through. So I just was so excited. Ray Baumgart wrote for us. I've even used some Wayne Downey stuff. I mean, it was just like anybody in the business. But what ended up happening was I just kept getting more and more opportunity. Well, it got to that fall, and I was a little worried about having enough money to get through the year. And a dear friend of mine, who is not doing really well right now, he's had a stroke, but he's fighting his way back, named Larry McCormick, called me, and he said, I've got this idea about doing these clinics, and I'd like for you to be a part of it. And it was called Weekend with the Experts. Mm-hmm. By the way, my wife loved that line, so I'm like, how'd that work out for you, baby? But she, at any rate, we started doing these weekends, and again, it was an intense, it was almost like a business seminar, and I got to pick who I want my partner to be, and I picked Freddie Martin. Well, Freddie had already started Spirit of Atlanta Drum Bugle Corps. He was a great band director, and it was perfect for us because we were just like, we would go out and we'd kind of tag team through the weekend because it was 2 days of intense stuff. I mean, you never let up. I mean, you'd take a break and, bathroom break and go for lunch, and that was about it. But those things saved me. And it just, all of a sudden people are saying, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know you could find people that could do this, whatever. So it just helped my business tremendously. About the same time, matter of fact, that same summer, I got a call from East Texas State University, which is now Texas A&M Commerce, I believe is the name of it. But at any rate, it was in Commerce, Texas. So I go down and do a clinic replacing George Zingali. Oh, so a guy named, oh my gosh, tell me I forgot that name. I had a picture of him this morning on my table. I didn't see it, but at any rate, he asked me to come down. So I did 18 summers down there.
Wow. And
over the course of that time, my claim to fame was I taught Texas bands how to stand in something other than a straight line. But the bands were fabulous.
They've evolved, yeah.
But I was going in a classroom with 120 band directors, and it was not unusual to have that. So all of this just sort of took off at the same time, and I was in the right place at the right time. If I'd known what I was doing, really, from a business standpoint, right, it could have been really, really something. Not that I'm complaining.
No, I get it. But I think it's what's
Jim
cool.
Keene, and that was the name I
Jim
forgot.
Keene, who went to Illinois.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also interesting that, you personally grew like crazy, but those names that you're just casually dropping, Larry McCormick, who literally started MBA, Marching Bands of America, that evolved to Bands of America, that evolved to Music for All. I mean, huge figure in what we do now. My goodness, Freddie Martin, who's still teaching in the drum corps activities at the highest levels and has 2 kids that are pretty good at trumpet.
I would think so.
They're okay. They're all right. So I just think it's amazing the period of time you went through and the people you were connected with that kind of got you to grow like that and get you so unbelievably connected to the band community nationally. And then eventually you end up getting hired at East Tennessee State University to teach. You do that for, I believe, 3 years. And then you get a phone call from John West. And what happened then?
Well, back up a couple years to East Tennessee. I got a call over there from a friend who was the department chair, and he asked me if I could find him a band director. And this was 86, I guess. And I said, I'll do my best, but it's August. And his band director left like 2 weeks before camp. They had nothing. They had no show. They had no music. They had nothing. They didn't even have numbers. And I said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I made some calls, and as I expected, there were not a lot of people that wanted it. And again, I go downstairs. Donna and I work on 2 floors apart. And that's probably a secret to a long marriage. But she said, you could make that work. And that was the year that our oldest son, Mike, started NC State. So she said, I think, if you can do it, we can make it work. So I got a deal with him. I said, if you'll house me 2 nights a week on campus, I'll do it for a year. So that's when I went over there. So then they did a search. And in the process of doing the search, somebody in administration, I will not call any names, but they forgot to call the candidate that had won the search. And by the time they reached out to that person, they'd already taken another job.
Okay.
So
here they were again.
So there they were. So I ended up staying what I thought was going to be another year. They had another search, and they asked me to be in the search. And part of the deal was they were going to send me back to graduate school. I was going to study, believe it or not, conducting, and because I felt like that was my weakest area. I had done all this marching band stuff, and I can get the band started and stopped and stuff. But I really was fascinated about doing that. Well, during that time, I ended up staying another year and a half, and we had hired an assistant during that time. And he was fantastic, a guy named Paul Hinman, who was a noted drum corps judge and a very good band director. Well, then John West calls. Then our son, that oldest son that started college, died on July 4th, 1991. And aside from just being totally devastated and, not knowing what to do, and, I prayed about it. And I think sometimes what you don't do when you have prayers is you expect the answer that you think will be the right answer. Sometimes it's something totally different, but you've got to be smart enough to recognize it. And for me, I thought it was right. And what was most unusual about that was that I told Donna about it. I said, John's interested in this, and I called East Tennessee, and they said, it's too close to camp. We can't start, and we can't let you out of this contract until the end of the year, which was December. So I ended up taking both bands. So I had the East Tennessee band. By that time, it had gone from about 88 to 188. It was a good band. I remember we did Channel One Suite for an opener that year. It was very good. And then, so we did that. And I'm thinking, I think if I can make the schedule work, I could do it. So the fortunate thing was, one of the first things I got to do when I got there was hire a young lady to be the band secretary. Patty Marlowe was a lady I hired. She was fantastic. Sheila Frizzell was the department secretary at Western.
Who knows all things.
Yeah, she was, I don't know if anybody knows any more about Western Carolina or how it works. And so at any rate, what I would do is I had my first cell phone, which looked like a World War II walkie-talkie. I've still got it, by the way, and it's huge. And it does a lot of the same things, redial and stuff like that. The numbers are just bigger. But so I would get to the top of Sam's Gap. and I could use the phone from Johnson City to Irwin, and then I had no service. I get to the top of Sam's Gap, and I had about an 80-yard stretch. I'd pull over on the side of the road, and by that time, I'd kind of made notes for myself, writing while I was driving on that curvy road. And I would call Sheila and say, if we can get these things done. And then on the way back, when I go the other way, I'd call Patty and do the same thing. And the other thing I did that was pretty smart during that time was when I got ready to take the job, I went to Tuscola High School's band camp. And I was looking for a drum instructor, and there was this guy there named Matt Henley.
Who's that?
And I don't know. He's a real nobody. But Matt was, I knew him through my children. He was about their age. He and Ginger and Andy were about the same age. They were in band together. And I knew he was very talented. And I was not always sure about if you got him headed in the right direction, he was amazing. Sometimes his directions bounced around a little bit. But at any rate, when he decided he would do that was a real key for me, because that was one thing I didn't have to worry about. I have to tell you a couple of stories about Matt. The first one is that he...
Oh, do tell. Do tell.
He started writing, and it's the first time he had good players. The first year, not so much. Actually, maybe two people in the drum line were majors.
I don't know exactly.
Jonathan Rudd and Jason Smith are the two I remember.
Maybe one or two others.
But I remember that Marty McCart played bass drum, so that will tell you, and he was a trumpet major. So, but the second year, he scrounged around. He had all these kids coming. He was very excited. And he started writing everything he wanted to play, basically in every measure. And so
I might have overwritten them.
Yeah, it was. But it was the beginning of an osmosis, because he started figuring it out. Now, I'll tell you what really figured it out. When we started that contest and you had the top drum guys in the country coming in, and you could have conversations about them, about what works and what doesn't work. And they would say things like, you don't have to play all that stuff in every measure. And it made a huge difference. But that was a key for me, because it's odd that we would have, 23, 24-year separation in our ages, but that we became very good friends. I trusted Matt. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. But I think that paid off. I think when you have staff like that, and the people we were able to surround ourselves with, and really, there were two of us doing the work of 3 or 4 or even 5. And
part-time.
You look at we were both adjunct until 1995. So and then Dr. Bardot came in and said, what do we need to really get this thing to the next level? And I said, well, first of all, we've got to be full-time. And he was the reason we started Tournament of Champions. He was like, we need to do this. We need to bring people on campus. And there's not a bigger recruiting event still at the university. So that's kind of the story of that. But it was a wonderful time. It was a great time of growth for all of us, I think. I know I had to learn to write for a much bigger band.
Quickly.
It got big in a hurry. So.
I do want to know, do you have a favorite performance memory being a director for WCU's band?
My favorite show is the 2008 show. I think that was, to me, it had such energy and pace about it.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good show.
But I think my favorite performance memory is the Rose Parade. I don't think there's anything in America that equals that. Maybe in the world. I really don't know. But I mean, it's such a fun, it's almost like it's a 2-year experience, because you go out there. I remember you and John and I went a year early, and we went more than once, and then I went 3 times, I think, counting the performance, and then ended up going back to do the All-American band, the NBA band. We did that, so we actually did 3 of those parades, but to be honest, none touched me like the Western band. I mean, I can still watch that video of them coming around that corner, and it was flawless. I mean, it was really good. And I remember we painted the turn, which is not a 90-degree turn; it's a 110-degree turn. We painted on the practice field and practiced in the mud, and I mean, it was nasty. And then we got closed one part of 107 and actually marched, because we wanted to make sure everybody could make it 6 miles. They tell you it's 5.5, but it's 6. And by the time you get off the bus, you're going to go at least 6. So, just stuff like that, I think that really sort of stands out in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with all that. That was an amazing period of time. And also, kind of tying this from the front end to the back end of the conversation, you've always been a staunch proponent of leadership and building leaders and how to do that and developing a culture within the band program, but especially the leadership thing. And so when you came in 1991, and I remember one of the very first conversations we had was about the leadership program and how you really felt like that we needed to build a laboratory, if you will, for music education majors. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that you were the librarian and you were the equipment manager, and how, when you went to that first job, how much you realized, oh my gosh, at least I know a system to do uniforms or whatever it is, and how it was just directly impacted your life, and how so many other students, they go out in the world and they don't know any of that stuff. They don't know what a PO is, and they don't know how to. So talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the leadership program and why that was so important to you to develop and build and make such a big part of what we do.
Honestly, one of the things I always thought when I was a student was that I wanted to do more things that were going to apply to my job. Like I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to conduct. I think the thing that schools of music everywhere do really, really well is they teach students how to play their instruments. I mean, there's some incredible players that come through here. Even the kids that are not majors are really, really fine players. But what we don't do sometimes is we don't teach them the nuts and the bolts, as I would say, how to get out of the band room. Right. I mean, a lot of times you'd be surprised how many bands I've gone to work and the band director literally could not organize a 2-dog fight. Right. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. And it's because they have never had that opportunity.
Yeah, it's not strangely not their fault.
The need to do it. And for me personally, having done that, and that really started when I was in high school. I was a uniform manager in high school. Other than being I was the band president, but other than being the band president, the most valuable thing I did was being the uniform manager. And when I came to Western, I did that. And by the way, the first day on the job at Silva Webster, my job was to unpack 50 brand new uniforms. The JCs wanted to build that band program, and they had bought 50 uniforms. And so my first job was to organize that. And where would I have been had I not had that experience? So my thought was, we need to teach students how to do that because they're going to want to know how to do it, and they'll probably, in the long run, do it better than we do it.
Sure.
And they do.
Oh, yeah. Rachel Walker did this year, I can tell you that.
I mean, over the years, that's been the case, is you get those people that, they figure out what that need is, and great leaders will find a way and a place to lead. They don't wait for you to designate them. They will find it. And that's one of the things I always noticed when we were doing interviews for different staff positions. We spent a lot of time just watching the kids. One of the things I would always do before band practice is I'd just wander around the field and watch section leaders, watch people in the section, see who was pulling somebody out to help an individual. And when they came in for an interview, they had a little advantage, in my opinion. A lot of people don't, they don't think about that. I know you guys probably thought, well, there's Bob just wandering around the field. I don't think he's doing anything. But in reality, that was kind of what I felt like I needed to be doing at that point. I don't know another. I know there are a lot of university bands that have this kind of leadership program or a leadership program, but I'm not sure they have anything that's any better detailed or attended to. I mean, when you think about, all the things, actually the history thing that we started with, if you remember when we went to Ohio State, you walk in Ohio State's band room, which, by the way, is in Ohio Stadium, and you walk in and there's this football-shaped museum.
Yeah, it's a museum.
And they have one or more uniforms in there, and then they have all around the sides are all the different pictures of the different bands and different eras and things. And my thought was, that's what you need to do. You need to be telling that story. And, stuff like this, these pictures up here, that makes a huge difference when people, when they wander through and look at what you're doing on a daily basis. And even the videotapes, and I must have 20 or 30, I guess 20 videotapes of, year in review kind of thing. You never get all the way through any of them. They're too long.
Right.
And they're too much fun. And they're really interesting to the 4 people that are in the frame at that moment. But I mean, what they really want to see is they want to see themselves perform. They want to see, what is this like when it all comes together?
Well, and I think you're speaking of the history thing, and major props to Rain and team. But we've really have been pushing our history, and it's very, very important. I really feel like I'm even talking today about your history here and what your vision was for the program and how we could develop it, and the leadership program that I'm strangely more proud of than what you see on a Saturday. It's just so cool to watch people develop in that way and to care so deeply about something. And we are absolutely parts and pieces of all those past bands. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You look at what we do now, we are parts and pieces. Now, I would like to think we've grown and evolved, but that leadership program is still the nucleus of what we do. And I look forward to those conversations that start in January, by the way. But
it's a tough month.
It's a very tough month, and at the same time, it's also cool that a student has to dress up nicely and bring in a cover letter and a resume. And if they stick with the program, they're going to do that about 3 times. Instead of their first time doing a professional interview being when they get out into the real workplace. The other thing I'm very proud of is when you look at it from a music education standpoint. A lot of the things that are running people out of the business is the administrative side of band.
Yep.
It's the running of a program. It's being completely ready musically, but not ready to run a team, much less administration side of band. So when the national average is people leaving the profession in 3 to 5 years, that's scary. That's scary. So I think we do a pretty good job of combating that and empowering our people. And I attribute that all to you, Bob. I really feel like that learning that from you about how important that was, and not seeing the baby steps early on, but seeing the huge strides we've made since then is pretty awesome. So thank you for your leadership and all that.
Well, I'm very proud of that. And I'm so happy for the teachers that I had that inspired me to see how far you could take it. I think that's one of the cool things is this program continues to develop. It has not stayed still, and I think it's a model for. And I've visited a lot of bands, and I've, a lot of high school bands, a lot of great high school bands, a lot of national championship high school bands, and all of them have some form of this. But one of the things the ones that seem to step up are the ones that have the students at the forefront of the leadership. A lot of bands can have the parents do it, or they have enough staff that they can do it, like you're in charge of the uniform. I'm not sure it's the same value. I think because you do it yourself, it's hands-on, and maybe sometimes it's not like you have to do that much, but you do participate, and I think that is the key, is everybody participates in it.
Yeah. It's ownership.
It is. Yeah.
It's being in the fabric of what's really going on. I always receive these looks of astonishment when we have recruits coming in with their parents. And they're like, "Oh, well, we'd like to still be involved. We were the band boosters of so and so and so and so." And we're like, "We don't have those." And they're always like, "What do you mean you don't have? We don't have parents. We don't have band boosters. We don't have any of that. Our students do everything." And they're blown away by that. And I'll tell you why they're blown away. They know how hard it is.
Yeah, because they've done it.
They've done it. They know how hard equipment is. They know how our uniforms and the library and all the things that we do. All those things are difficult. Props, whatever we're doing. We're all hands on deck. We all get it done, which I think there's a lot of pride in all that. Well, just to kind of wrap up our conversation, I guess I'd just be interested from your lens, Bob, a guy that's been through different phases of band through the years, and obviously since you retired in 2011, I think that was. What's your perception of the WCU band and how we've continued to try and grow and change and develop from your observation, from your lens? What are your thoughts?
I think it's probably still, and I say still, it remains the model of efficiency in terms of when you think about how many parts there are to this thing, and how well it works. I think it's a model for so many university bands, because a lot of the bands that fall a little bit short, the reason they fall short is that inactivity of the students who could really push a little harder to make that better where they ask. And I think that's a case in education. I mean, I think about it a lot. You know, if you were doing science or you were doing math, you know, to involve those students not just in doing that problem, but make that problem applicable to what's going to happen in their real life. And I wish there were a way to make education like that, because I see it, for me, I think that's the key to all of it. I mean, there's a discipline about music that you're not going to be good unless you're disciplined. I mean, period. You're not going to learn the little things you need to learn unless you're willing to put in the time. And these students, a lot of them, when they come to Western, or when they spend a year or two here, they've figured out what they've got to do to be successful as a player, and they will continue to do that. What they don't figure out is how to be successful as a teacher. Now, for me personally, I never had aspirations of being a professional tuba player. By the time I was graduating from Western, I realized that I'd probably already heard 15 or 20 tuba players, college players, who were better than I was. And I was close. You know, I wasn't embarrassed to play, and I still play. And I think that's important. But what I did realize was that, you know, particularly that last year, when I got to stand in front of that band and have my own band, I realized that I had a real advantage, because I was not afraid to do the work that it took to do it. When I think about that, those kids that were there that first night, and I did that rehearsal, and we might have finished the introduction to the fight song. I stopped for everything, and I often think back, you know, was that the right approach? And I think it was, because I think at that point, even though I overdid it, they realized I was serious about it,
Right.
and that we're going to have standards.
Standards, yep. Expectations.
And I think that's what this band has done. I think you do it not only in leadership or in musicianship, but also in leadership. And I think the other part of it is if I were a student coming into this band, I know I'm going to be on the cutting edge. I know I'm going to be doing whatever's cool.
Right.
And that's
the goal.
That is very, very, very important. And I think to performers of any age, you know, the material you do is what makes you what you are. So that's kind of my thought about it. Well done.
Well, thank you, Bob. Well done to you, sir. I tell you, you know, you come up in a lot of conversations, and I oftentimes get in a tough spot from a leadership perspective, especially the past couple of years, where I go, what would Bob do? You know, I mean, I really do think about that, and luckily I have you on speed dial. But, you know, we still stand on the bedrock that you laid, and as we've had in this conversation, just some amazing music educators that have come, band directors that have come through this valley and really made band important. And not just the playing and yes, the performing, but all that comes with it, the camaraderie, the teamwork, and the leadership. It's everything, because 76% of this year's marching band were non-music majors. They're taking something out of this that's going to pertain to their life. Yep. It's hopefully in a very positive thing and a constructive thing, because like you said, without discipline, you have nothing. And, you know, I think we give the right amount of that along with the fun.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Bob, for being on this episode with us. Absolute delight to hear everything that you've done throughout your career and everything for this band, and also just the history with everything. You have such a unique and cool perspective, so it's so awesome to hear you speak every single time. Well, thank you so much for listening into this episode of the Showtime Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. A special thank you to our main man, Sam Wallace, and everyone who supports the Pride of the Mountains Marching Band. And a special shout out to our friends on the Western Wednesdays podcast. Extra special shout out this time because their most recent episode featured my mom.
Your mom.
And shameless plug, but also I'm going to be totally honest with you. This podcast probably would not exist if it wasn't for the support and encouragement that I got from my mom.
I love it.
When I pitched the idea of this podcast to her back in like last January, she was like, "Okay, so when's it happening? When are you going to do it?" And yeah, so she's just amazing. So definitely check out that episode. It's out right now. And be sure to stay connected with Western Wednesdays to stay connected with WCU alumni as a whole.
Yeah, and Long Purple Line, can't wait to see you cheering in the stands. Current members, thank you so much for an amazing season, and can't wait to see you on the field with me again very, very soon. And of course, as always,
Go Cats!